Well, hello again, friends, and welcome back to Friday Roll Call. And to our regular audience, I am fired up to be back here with you. And to our new audience, and there are a lot of new people here in Friday Roll Call this week, welcome. Welcome to the forum where we dig deeper into the concepts and principles that our team has taught you by way of our keynotes, our breakout sessions, our workshops, the Top Gun Teamwork Program. And if you and I have not yet met, welcome. My name is Robert Teschner, call sign Cujo. I'm the founder and CEO here at Team VMAX Group, and I'm fired up to have you here with us. And for everybody, I've got some interesting, call them semi-random reflections on teamwork, leadership, and what it takes to build both. And we're going to start with pulling from the world that my team comes from, the world of combat operations, specifically fighter operations. One of the things that business leaders have shared with me through the years is you had the benefit, Cujo, of being in a world where you had a enemy, where you had something that you were rallying against, a country group, whatever, that you were there to try to defeat. That was the thing where you went down range. The team galvanized around this. You all worked your tails off to go out there and win. We don't have that same environment here in business. We can't build the same kinds of quality teams that you have in the military. I've heard it countless times. And it's interesting because I guess I get it, right? We're not out there in literal combat. And I understand. I've lived the experience of galvanizing the team and having that shared sense of mission, and I've seen what that does. I mean, you just think about it. Just preparing to go down range, it's an interesting experience. You go through these lines, you get issued new equipment like chemical warfare gear because of the nasty stuff that you might be exposed to in the places that you're going. You get the opportunity to sign your last will and testament as part of the processing line because that could happen while you're away. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. And then you get to the place and it's a totally different environment. And it feels like you're in a combat setting because you are, and you're going out there and they don't like. So I get it. And like you do rally, you do galvanize the team. It is something that is an interesting forcing function that elicits the best. I mean, truly, we were our best when we were in that kind of an environment. How do we achieve that here in business? All right. Unique roll call. I've got some references for you. First reference comes to us from Mr. Patrick Bet David. I got this book, by the way, Choose Your Enemies Wisely, from client slash friend. It was a gift. I enjoy the gift, and I think it's relevant to our conversation today. I'm going to read to you, if I may, from the inside flap of Patrick's book. What's the difference between your competitor and your enemy? It asks us. The inside flap says a competitor will reveal your weaknesses in the market. An enemy will inspire resilience you never knew you had. Interesting. And the fundamental assertion of the book is you need to choose some enemies out there wisely. A competitor will force you to work hard to stay in business. An enemy will get you out of bed every morning with fire in your eyes. How interesting is that? Oh, by the way, a competitor will show your team the numbers to beat. An enemy will create a passion that moves your team to blow past projected revenue. And the inside flap of this book says, for your company to succeed, you must understand and analyze your competitors. But to achieve long-term domination, you need enemies to destroy. What an interesting premise. From an interesting book that interestingly refers to me. The reason why my friend gave this to me. Page 20. There's an entire book called Debrief to Win, written by Robert Cujo Teschner to show businesses how to study the past. He actually quotes me. All right, that's kind of cute. But this whole premise of choosing enemies in order to galvanize the team and inspire passion to win, that's something for us to think about on the teamwork side. Good. Helping us to overcome the self-limiting belief that we can't be the kinds of teams that you are in the military, Cujo. Good. Another thing that I want to share with you in today's reflection is how it is that we intentionally go about the business of developing leaders in a fighter squadron. And that's the only piece of the military enterprise that I can really speak to because I lived it. And there were things that we did during the fighter squadron time that I didn't personally enjoy very much. And one of the things that we did was having additional duties. So back when I was in an operational fighter squadron, in addition to being prepared to go fly my missions, in addition to earning my qualifications and maintaining those qualifications, in addition to trying to win every time that I flew, I also had other jobs. And they changed on a regular basis. I've been the chief of training in a fighter squadron. I've been the chief of standardizations and evaluations in a fighter squadron. I've been in the scheduling shop, the one that comes up with the master schedule for who's going to fly what when. I've been in charge of weapons and tactics in a fighter squadron. I've been in the safety office of a fighter wing. And I've had all these different experiences, most of which I found were somewhat detracting from my primary focus, the things that I enjoyed, and yet all of which were instrumental in allowing us to be able to fly effectively and safely on a regular basis. And so we did them. We all had these additional duties. Everybody had additional duties. And we rotated. We didn't stay in the same additional duty for an entire career. We were in, I don't know, maybe I was the training officer for a year. Maybe I was in the scheduling shop for 6 months. Maybe I was in charge of weapons and tactics for a couple of years. But there was an expiration date to that time frame, and at some point I would give the shop over to somebody else, and I'd hand them the book that outlines how we do things, and I'd train up my successor to make sure that they were equipped to take over for me confidently and competently, and there it was. Now, when I came back as a fighter squadron commander, one of the advantages that I had was I understood so much of how the operation worked because I had done it at a tactical level as a junior member of the team. And that's a really important thing to have. I mean, I had empathy for what these folks were going through. I had an understanding for why those functions existed and how they supported my command. I understood how all of these pieces came together to allow us to do our jobs well. And that was really, really important. Now, a lot of times a business leader will say, "Well, we don't have the capacity to do those kinds of things. We can't make that happen." And I wonder, which brings us to the second reference today. I'll put on this side, Bitter Brew. I found this to be a really fascinating read. I'm really kind of fascinated by the Bush family, by Anheuser-Busch. I've made St. Louis my adopted home. All right, one of the things that I took away from reading Bitter Brew was that the Bush family does not seem to me to have been very interested in what degree of education you got. In fact, a lot of members of the Bush family kind of skipped school or maybe didn't do too well in school or whatever, at least according to this author over here. What really did matter, though, what really mattered was that all of them understood the business of making beer. And so even though the last name was Bush, the future heirs of the company started out at the bottom, and they had a daily understanding of how the operation works because they were operating in it from the bottom rungs, moving their way up, ultimately equipping them with the understanding, empathy, full understanding of how this operation together produces what it is that people are buying so that they can keep the enterprise going. Brilliant, brilliant approach, similar to the approach that we use in fighter squadrons. I offer it to you as business leaders to consider. Is there a way, for example, that we could take somebody who's in marketing and put them in ops for a given amount of time to help them to understand that operation? Can we take somebody from sales and put them in accounting and finance? Can we put something from accounting and finance into marketing? Can we mix these people up? Folks that have the capacity potentially to someday be in charge of the entire operation so that they better understand it. And oh, by the way, to help better integrate the different functions so that we're not so siloed. Interesting, interesting thought. But the thing that ties all of this together, and the thing that we probably need more of in all cases, is this. And not a sales pitch for the book. In fact, I would guess most everybody here has a copy of and has read at least chapter 6 of it. So that's not the point. The point is the frequency with which we're doing these things. And that's really the question. How often do debriefs take place in your place of work? And how big is that delta from where it is that it needs to be? And why would frequent debriefing help us when it comes to building really good teams and developing leadership skills? And the simple answer is that it's in the debrief that we learn. And we've got to be learning constantly, especially now, how to lead through disruption. So we've got our plans. We're out there executing. We're doing stuff all the time. Question is, are we doing what needs to be done as effectively as it could be in order to help us to advance the mission, especially now, especially in the midst of all the disruption that we're facing? The question is, how much are we harnessing this tool, the one tool that binds all of us? You may never read either of these other two books, but everybody here has had exposure to the one that I just held up. It is the grand unifier for this crowd. How often are we harnessing the skill set that's embedded in the debrief, one that requires us to learn to be teachers, mentors, and coaches in order to build capacity? And if we find that we're not doing it nearly often enough, what are we going to do to change that dynamic? Biggest self-limiting belief that we have is there's not enough time to do it. This I challenge. And so as we go into this weekend, it's really another opportunity for us to take a look at and assess, how are we spending our time here? And what is it that we need to be spending more of our time on? And my guess is probably 99.9% of all of us, myself included, would acknowledge that we probably need to be debriefing to win more frequently. So what are we going to do about that? Great reflection. Okay, so that's the main focus of today's talk. I want to shift gears, break, and talk about one additional thing that I've learned in coaching up Top Gun teamwork. And it's taken me a minute to kind of connect the dots over here, but it ultimately was kicked off by a question that one of our students raised this week, which is a frequently stated question in the Top Gun teamwork program. And that is, when it comes to the 5-step Eagle planning methodology, what's the difference between contingency planning and red teaming? Happens every single time that we teach this. Multiple people struggling with, hey, so I've done my contingency planning. How do I then reframe this and think about how I defeat myself as my enemy? I can't think of any enemies out there. And so I don't see how this would work. I don't understand how I could red team the thing that I feel like I've already red teamed. All right, so quick answer to this, and this is the dot connecting that's taken me far too long to figure out. I think if we want some external feedback on how it is that we have not done this well enough, just ask somebody, instead of to red team your plan, to give you feedback on it. And I almost guarantee that they're going to do exactly what would happen in a red teaming session. And I see it all the time. All right. Really nice people. Hey, give me some feedback. Here's where you suck. Here's what you did wrong. Here's the thing that blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, ultimately, they're picking apart the plan. Ultimately, they're red teaming it for us. And so until we get to the level of really refining how it is that we're delivering feedback for the near term, let's ask for feedback. And I think that probably solves the 5th step of the Eagle planning process. And just know, we here at Team VMAX Group are working on an entire program to help us to understand how to give feedback properly and effectively. All right. So this approach is only going to work for a short period of time. But until then, until we deploy that, ask people for feedback, and you're going to get a good red team. And that's it. Lots of things for us to think about going into this weekend. Know that we're rooting for you here at Team VMAX Group. Looking for you to lead even better next week than you did this week. And I hope to be back again with you again next Friday.